Good morning. Thank you for tuning in to our Thought for the Day, brought to you by Avon Valley Churches, a group of churches in the New Forest in Hampshire. Today is the 17th of July, and my name is Alex Sains, and I'm one of the worship leaders here in Avon Valley. So this morning, I would like to talk to you about a couple of verses from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 11, that I think can really help us when life is tough. I will read them to you. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. These two verses are so incredible. Such beautiful, encouraging words. But before we talk about them, I'd like to ask you a question. I wonder how many of you have lied this week? Or let's make it easier. I wonder how many of you have lied this morning? And specifically, I'm talking about the lies we often tell when we're asked the question, how are you? Why do we feel the need to say, oh, I'm good, thanks, when we're not good? In fact, we're pretty bad. Why do we say, I'm fine, when we feel far from fine? How many of you have said those words this morning and on reflection, they weren't true? So many of us are not okay. We smile, we talk, we listen, we even laugh maybe, but we fail to name that lump of sadness or anger or depression that is sitting somewhere in us. We carry it around, hidden from view, under our clothing, and if someone catches sight of it, we feel shame. I wonder why. We all do it. But I sometimes wonder if Christians are the worst. Do we feel a pressure to be okay because we have a faith? Do we feel the need to show people that because we have a faith and we trust God, that we're okay? Or do we worry that if people glimpse some of the God we love through us, that they won't be impressed? I mean, what does it look like to be a Christian? Maybe when people meet us out in the town or village we live in, they won't want to meet our God when we present as a bit sad or mad. So, do we feel a pressure to present a more wholesome appearance that speaks of a more contented Christian? But the reality is, we're all human. We all have times in our lives, in our days, when we don't feel okay. We're hurting. We're furious. We're eaten up with sadness, with loss, with shame. This is the reality of life. We will not be able to relate to people by pretending that life is good all the time. We're far more likely to relate to people when we can admit to our mess. But here in these two verses is the good news. This passage is one of my favourite summaries of that good news that we have as Christians. So let's look at what Jesus is actually saying here. I'm going to pick out 4 things for us to notice in these 2 verses that, for me, summarise the good news. Firstly, Jesus offers us rest. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Weary is such a descriptive word, isn't it? To be weary is to be tired, not just in your body, but in your soul. It makes us think of a state of mental and emotional fatigue. And burdened or heavy laden in some translations means we may be carrying a heavy load, causing us to be weary. Rest is what weary people seek. Rest restores our strength to carry on. Jesus knows that we can all feel weary and burdened at times. Life is full of struggles and hardships. It's really easy to grow weary. It's normal to get discouraged. It's common to stumble under the weight of life's burdens. And Jesus knows that and offers us rest. So the last 5 words of verse 28 are so important. I will give you rest. Firstly, let's notice the word give. This is a gift. You don't need to earn this or deserve this. You just need to say, oh, yes, please. Secondly, the word rest. The word rest in this context can be translated as to be still or to cease from movement. Jesus is offering to take all the restless longings, the ceaseless worries of our heart, and give us rest, to be still with him, to rest in his presence. The second thing to notice about this passage is that Jesus offers us to take his yoke. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. So I wonder if you can picture what a yoke looks like. Jesus is referring here to a wooden yoke that typically joined 2 animals together so they could combine strength to pull a load that would have been too much for one animal to pull alone. And the yoke helps the animals to walk in a straight line. Jesus was using a metaphor or an illustration that ordinary people in those days could really relate to. They were used to seeing oxen yoked together. And the Jewish people described living under the law as having a yoke upon them. And Jesus is saying to them not to live like that. Jesus is saying here, if we try to plough through life alone, if we try to carry our own burdens on our own, we will grow weak and weary. By accepting Jesus' yoke, we're allowing him to walk with us, to take the load, to help us walk in a straight line. We turn to Jesus, we yield to him, we allow him to lead the way. And in doing this, we learn from him and we find freedom. The third thing I want to point out is what Jesus is like. For I am gentle and humble in heart. So what's Jesus like? He's gentle and humble. And let's face it, when we're feeling weary, wild, worse for wear, we long for someone who will be gentle with us. And that's what he's offering here, a gentle and humble heart. A heart that knows our little lumps of sadness or worry and says, here, let me shoulder that for a while. You're tired. The fourth and final thing I want to point out is the last sentence. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. The people Jesus was talking to here were burdened under the law. But Jesus is saying something different here. He's saying, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. He's saying, turn to me, follow me, let me help you. Life is hard. Some days are a challenge. Some days you may not even be able to see the road ahead of you. I know you're struggling. I want to help. Let me strengthen you for the journey ahead. Let me give you rest for your soul. And if we go back to where we started and we think about our lives as Christians, our mission to love others, to bring God into the lives of others by showing people something of the God we believe in the way we live our lives. Is it real or even appealing to show people that we're happy, sorted, mentally healthy people? Is that what people want to see? Will that be real to them? Or is it better to show people that we are a bit broken, a bit scarred, a bit unhappy? But we also have some good news. If we come to God in our pain, our shame, our unhappiness, we create an inner climate in which to meet with God. For the ultimate comfort is not release from our pain, but from the conviction that nothing can separate us from the love of God. We know that God is there in our mess. God is there in our sadness. God is there on those days when you don't feel like saying, "Oh, I'm good, thanks." He offers to carry our burdens. He offers us rest. And sometimes when life around us crumbles, maybe having faith is just about trusting in God's faithfulness, in his promise. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Amen.